Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Fronteras at Changing America. I'm Anthony Morneau. During this pandemic, immigrant advocates and nonprofits in New Mexico have voiced strong concern about what they say are language access barriers that may be preventing residents from applying for food and medical benefits they may be eligible for. Here to talk about this issue with us is Verenice Peregrino Pompa, an attorney with the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
Okay, I want to talk about a recent motion that your organization has filed in the lawsuit Deborah Hatton Gonzalez versus David Scrace. In a press release, your group said that the motion asks the U.S. District Court of New Mexico to order the New Mexico Human Services Department to comply with federal and court-ordered requirements to translate food and medical assistance application notices, informational materials into languages prominently spoken in New Mexico communities. I'm quoting the press release that you sent out about this motion. I'd like to hear from you. Why is your organization filing this motion?
Yes, that's correct. Everyone should have access to food and health care, and no one should be turned away or, as New Mexicans, we really value all of the different languages spoken by our communities, and we know it's one of our greatest strengths. And no one should have to go hungry or without medical services. But that's exactly what's happening in New Mexico, and that's why we filed this motion.
Okay. Now, we reached out to the New Mexico Human Services Department to get their opinion on this motion, and they emailed us back a response saying, quote, the New Mexico Human Services Department opposes the recent motion filed by the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. HSD is in compliance with the federal law. HSD provides application materials in both English and Spanish and for other languages. Interpretation services are available to applicants who need assistance. According to our federal partners, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, USDA, the HDS is fully compliant with the required federal translation and interpretive services, end quote. Your thoughts on what they said there in that response?
So we don't agree. We know that under federal law, HSD is required to provide translation and interpretation, and thousands of New Mexicans who qualify for these benefits are illegally denied because of these lack of interpreting and translation. And federal law explicitly requires translation into languages additional to Spanish, and it depends on population thresholds. So we know that many New Mexicans speak all of these other languages that meet the population thresholds based on federal law. And there's a difference between translation and interpretation. Interpretation is oral and translation is written, so like the application. So under federal law, regardless of the language you speak, you should be getting interpreting. And then for languages that meet these population thresholds, they have to translate the vital documents such as applications and notices. So we know that in New Mexico, there are significant populations and ones that meet the threshold of speakers that of people that speak Vietnamese, Chinese, Arabic, Dari, Swahili, and the application should be translated into those languages.
Okay, so if we go to the website and try to apply for food or medical assistance, what sort of languages are we going to see?
So the online application is only available in English and Spanish. And if you go to the website, there's a drop-down menu, and it has 2 other languages that you can hover over, and then it'll say that those languages are unsupported, and it says to call the HSD phone number. So when you call HSD, the phone options are only in English and Spanish. That means that someone who speaks another language has to then listen to many phone prompts in English or Spanish And then it's really hard for people, if they only speak Vietnamese, for example, to be able to navigate through all of those phone prompts to be able to reach an interpreter. And we have examples like one of our clients, she so she's a small business owner and she had to close down her business because of the pandemic, and she had very little income. So she had to apply for SNAP. And at this time, she had so little income that she couldn't afford to pay for a place to live and to pay for her storefront. So she ended up having to live at her storefront, and she applied for SNAP. And then she got these notices only in English, even though she put in her application that she only spoke Chinese. And she got notices about having to do a phone interview. And she missed the phone interview because, again, she didn't understand the notices. And then when she got these notices saying that she missed an interview, someone was able to read them to her, but she was unable to call HSD to reschedule that phone interview. For her to qualify for SNAP, she needs to do this phone interview. And she was unable to get to a person to ask for an interpreter, and that delayed her benefits more. So these people that aren't able to apply, they're being delayed in getting their benefits because they have to get help from a third party to be able to apply or get on the phone with HSD. Then the process is being delayed even more because they can't talk to people on the phone, obviously, in English or Spanish. And then throughout this lawsuit, it's being delayed even more because they're not getting this help that they need. And this woman, our client, she was unable to really afford food and be able to pay for her other expenses. So she lost a significant amount of weight while she was living at her storefront and unable to get her SNAP benefits.
Okay. So help me understand this a little bit better. You think that the Human Services Department should have on-demand translation services available and interpretive services available?
So everyone should be getting these benefits regardless of the language they speak. And federal law requires that they provide meaningful access. And so we're not asking for the application to be translated into every language. It's just the languages represented by a population of New Mexicans that meet that threshold under federal law. So that is not a lot of languages. Like I said, it's Vietnamese, Chinese, Spanish. That's a one-time translation. They only need to translate the application one time, and the Medicaid and SNAP application are the same application. So doing the one translation would take care of both of those benefits application. As far as interpreting, people, regardless of the language they speak, have the right to interpreting. And that's not a huge burden because state agencies already have language contracts where they use phone interpreters, and they would be able to do that. So for the languages that don't meet the threshold, they would be able to provide interpreting so that someone can explain to them the application. So it's not necessarily a huge burden. They're already contracts that people have, but even though the interpreting is available, it's not readily available, and it's hard to navigate to, and it's hard for people to be able to get to interpreting when they call HSD.
Okay, so this issue is kind of a part of a longer running lawsuit, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to hear a little bit about that. The Hatton Gonzalez lawsuit, it has been something that the state has been facing for a long time. Can you share with us some historical perspective about this lawsuit and kind of give us an update on the corrective action plan? That would be really helpful for our audience in helping us understand this issue a little bit more.
Yes, so this lawsuit was filed in the 80s, and it was about all of the barriers that people face when trying to apply for Medicaid and SNAP. And there was a consent decree, so a settlement entered in 1988. And the court ordered HSD to fix all of these barriers that people are facing. And they're having to do with issues applying, renewing, verification, and some of the issues with the notices that they receive. So it's making it hard for people to not only apply, but continue to stay on these benefits. And it's causing all of these extra burdens for people to be able to both apply and stay on. And throughout all of these years, we've been working with HSD to continue to try to implement the changes that were asked for in the consent decree. And language access is only one of those issues. And that's what the motion is about continuing to ask. Well, now it's about asking the court to make sure that HSD complies with the consent decree. But we've raised this issue many times with HSD. We have meetings, they're called meet and confers, where we talk to HSD and try to bring up the issues that are continuing in this case. And we've had letters sent in from community organizations also asking for them to provide interpreting and translation. So we've raised this issue many, many times. And finally, this is like a last resort to ask the court to step in and make them comply with the consent decree.
Okay, so this is an issue. You mentioned community groups. Already on the show this season, we've heard from New Mexico Voices for Children about this issue, voicing concerns about immigrants, refugees, residents in New Mexico being left out of possible benefits they're entitled to due to language access barriers. This is part of a larger issue as well of folks being left out of federal relief and access to those federal relief programs that have been implemented during the pandemic due to various reasons. So I'd like to hear from you a little bit more about why, what exactly is federal law and state law in translating, this informational materials dealing with food and medical assistance.
Yes, so we have been partnering with community organizations on this work. Some of our partners include the New Mexico Asian Family Center, and they have actually had to step in to help people apply for benefits because the people that they help, aren't able to apply on their own. And it's actually not the organization's obligation to do this. They actually, they do other type of work, and they're being additionally burdened by having to provide these services that are actually the obligation of the state. But yeah, under federal law. So federal law requires that federal funding recipients like HSD, the state agency, that they provide meaningful access to people so that people can access their services. So, people say things like, oh, services are available, help is available, but they're not really available if people can't apply for them, if people don't understand how to get them, if people, sometimes people are able to sign up and then they get all these notices that are only in English, and then they lose benefits because they don't understand what like the next step is, like the documents they have to provide or the steps they have to take to verify that. But under federal law, there's requirements that for SNAP, there are federal SNAP requirements that require that if there's a certain population of people who speak a certain language, low-income speakers that speak a certain language, that the application be translated into those languages. And again, federal law also requires meaningful access from federal funding recipients for people to be able to apply. And that could be as easy as phone interpreting, but for the languages that meet those population thresholds, it means that notices have to be translated, the application has to be translated, and so that people can actually apply and access those benefits.
Okay, you mentioned one specific case about a business owner who was impacted by this. Can you share with us any other cases where this has happened? I know you mentioned in a press release your organization sent out that a mother of a 13-year-old son was impacted when she went into an office, a human services department office, and tried to seek benefits. Can you share with us a little bit more about this case?
Yes, so this woman went into an HSD office and she needed to apply for Medicaid, and she was told that she needed to leave and come back with her own interpreter. So if she's seeking benefits, she already has low income, she doesn't have a ton of money. So for her to provide her own interpreter or her, provide her own interpreter to accompany her to her appointment, she'd have to pay someone. So we've heard of many people who are paying $50 for someone to accompany them to an HSD appointment, or paying $50 to $100 to have somebody read them documents. So people, by the time they get benefits, they've already spent a great deal of that money on paying for an interpreter. And people shouldn't have to pay for their own interpreter. Again, it's the obligation of the state, and it shouldn't be left up to organizations in the community to do it. It shouldn't be left up to sometimes their children to have to interpret for them. That's like really a huge burden to place on children. And, I know firsthand how hard that is. I used to interpret for my parents when I was very little. And at the age of 8, I wasn't, I couldn't fully understand like all of these processes or, how to deal with state agencies, healthcare, all of these things that were much too advanced for me to understand. And all of these people's kids are having to do this when really it's the responsibility of the state.
Okay, now we did ask the Human Services Department about this case that was mentioned in the press release, and we showed them that. So in their response, quote, HSD is not investigating the incident. The Center for Law on Poverty news release received via the media is the first HSD has heard of this customer's experience. HSD would prefer to collaborate with the Center for Law on Poverty on specific customer experiences rather than responding to an accusation in a news release, end quote. This obviously is the first time they've heard about this specific incident. I mean, did you file a complaint or reach out to HSD about this incident?
Again, we've brought these issues up many times during our meetings with them. We've sent letters. We, again, have brought this up many, many times, and we are still not, they still haven't translated the application. They still haven't provided better interpreting over the phone. And we've not seen any documentation that federal authorities are, one, aware of the demographics in New Mexico, and two, that they have found HSD to be in compliance with the law. However, federal oversight tracks a limited number of policies, and language access is often not fully enforced. So we, again, have brought this issue up many times. Our community groups have brought this up, and still there hasn't been significant change.
All right, now you just mentioned at the federal level, so it sounds like this isn't just a problem that's unique to New Mexico. Is this something that states across the country are dealing with?
Yes, through our work, we know that states across the country also have, language access issues and have passed legislation to try to get better language access within their states. We actually have been, we supported the New Mexico Asian Family Center in legislation this past legislative session where if passed, the bill would require state agencies to all develop a language access plan and to collaborate. Because like I said before, some state agencies already have language access contracts. So they have, interpretation and translation services that they use. So through that bill, our hope was that agencies would collaborate and share resources to reduce costs. So they'd be able to maybe have like a model language access plan that they would then use to develop state agency specific plans, but then be able to share those interpreting and translation services to be able to provide vital documents in other languages.
But I mean, with this issue, we just had a census. So do you think this is going to get more attention as we get more reliable data in on the demographics in New Mexico and other states?
Yes, and actually in our motion, we cite to census data that says that tens of thousands of New Mexicans, speak other languages. We know that thousands of New Mexicans speak languages other than English that are low income and qualify for SNAP and Medicaid. We know that there's 13,000 New Mexicans who are eligible for Medicaid, are unenrolled in Medicaid, and speak languages other than English and don't speak English very well. So we know that this is affecting thousands of New Mexicans, and we really need for HSD to provide translation and interpretation so that they can access these benefits, especially during a time like a global pandemic when people have so few resources and, nobody should have to go without healthcare or food.
So in the press release your organization released when they announced this motion, your organization mentioned that there have been some improvements by the state to address some of the issues that were involved with the Hatton Gonzalez lawsuit. What are some of those issues where we have seen improvements?
So this is ongoing, and I think that we've seen some improvements in regards to notices and such, but again, one of the biggest issues is language access, and that has not really improved. But some of the issues that we saw were having to do with enrollment and then recertification. Some of the issues were also around like immigration status, and we're collaborating with HSD to improve like how their IT system is able to recognize immigration statuses that are eligible for benefits, for example. I think that that's been improved.
Okay, the New Mexico Human Services Department recently announced that $1.4 million in economic relief would be available to residents in the state who are left out of federal relief programs. Do you think this is a positive step in addressing this issue of folks in New Mexico being left out of relief?
Yes, definitely. And, we know that that we hope that maybe some of those funds will be used to help some of the barriers in SNAP and Medicaid and maybe language access. But again, like we said, because they are federal funding recipients, they're already required to do this under federal law. So hopefully this will be more money that can be put towards these issues, but they're already required to do these things.
Okay, in an email, the state informed us that the Human Services Department provides translation services for a contractor for customers in need. We are asking specifically about the applications for that $1.4 million. But they work with a contractor. I mean, what are your thoughts on the contractor that the state is working with?
I'm sorry, can you specify?
In providing translation services, the state works with a contractor. Are you satisfied with the contractor that the state works with?
I'm not sure which contractor they work with, but I mean, we think that if they are already using a contractor, then maybe the contractor could, for example, translate the application and help translate the notices. But did you say it was like on a case-by-case basis, or how did you say they're using this contractor?
Okay, well, I was asking specifically about folks who are interested in applying for the $1.4 million. When I asked them this question, they said that in regards to providing translation and what languages the application is available in, they said, quote, the current economic relief application, as well as applications for SNAP, Medicaid, are available in English and Spanish. Spanish is the only language that meets the federal threshold for providing the applications in another language. I'm quoting what they emailed me. For other languages on the current economic relief application, like Vietnamese, Swahili, and other languages, the customer is directed to call our customer service number, and staff will work with them on translation services. They also say the Human Services Department provides translation services via a contractor for customers in need. Customer service staff are trained on this process. Posters are also located in the offices, as well as advertising translation services. So that's the response we got from the Human Services Department. I mean, with this issue, as we move forward, what are some things you think that can be addressed and easily taken care of right now with this issue?
So the distinction, I think, is that there are SNAP-specific regulations that require a lower population threshold for translations to be required for some of those languages. So you're talking about some other federal relief that's not SNAP specific, but like so our motion is about under SNAP federal regulations, the threshold is much lower than federal law that would apply to other programs, like for example, Medicaid. So I understand that what you're saying is that for some of the other languages, for those for the federal relief programs, that they're able to use an interpreter, and that's fine. That's the requirement for other programs, but for SNAP specifically, the application has to be translated into those languages. So I'm glad that there is a language contract for those other benefits, but for them to comply with the consent decree in federal law, they need to also translate the SNAP application.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time to discuss this issue. Verenice Peregrino Pompa is an attorney with the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us on the program.
Thank you so much.
And we want to thank you for joining us for Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Anthony Moreno. We will see you next time. And remember, you can always view past episodes of Fronteras at our website, krwg.org. Just look for the local television section.